Hey there, everybody. It's Nathan with Doctors of Running. Today, I'm doing something a little bit different than we usually do. I'm actually going to be talking a little bit about watches. I was sent from Coros the Coros Apex Pro to review, and I'm just going to give a quick user experience review between the Apex Pro and what I typically use, which is one that I bought with my own money, which is the Garmin 245 without music, because I usually don't run with music. I guess I'm weird that way. So this won't dive deep into the specs. I'll post below some links that gives you more information on the exact specifications, but I more want to talk about user experience and then a couple considerations regarding how these watches use the data that they have to spit back feedback to us as runners and what we should do with that. So first, let's just walk through kind of initial experience putting the watch on. There's definitely a notable weight difference between the Apex Pro and the Garmin 245. Garmin 245 is a much lighter watch. And what I would say is that in those first couple of days of trying the Apex Pro, it was noticeable. But if I had never worn this watch in the past, the 245, I'd have been totally fine in the Apex Pro. It's a more heavy duty metal and screen that's a little bit more protective, a little bit more durable compared to what I got in the 245. But I've had no issues with scratching. I have dropped this watch and I've fallen before in it and I've probably hit it, but it's done just fine. So there is a weight difference. You can decrease the weight of the Apex Pro by getting the nylon band. I have the silicone one. And speaking of the silicone band, this was one of the issues I had with it. It has a double strap construction, and I just had a hard time adjusting it and getting it to fit best on my wrist. So I felt like it would slide around or be too tight. So I couldn't find that just right fit. And I would be curious to try the nylon strap to see if I could use the Velcro to get it a little bit more secure on the fit of my wrist. You know, the usability between these watches is different. The Apex Pro, I'll try to show you, utilizes kind of this roll bar here on the side, and that's how you scroll through. Let's see if I can get it to focus. Come on, there we go. That's how you scroll through all of your home screens. And then when you're running, I'll try to bring this to a run here. So if you are, gym cycle. Oh, this was the other thing. This watch has all of these different types of things: indoor run, trail run, track run, mountain climbing, windsurfing, but no walk feature. There's hiking, just no walking. So if you want to walk, this isn't your watch. Anyway, so we'll get this kind of started here. If you want to stop the watch, you're going to have to roll all the way through once it locks up to be able to hit pause. It kind of wants to make it foolproof so that you can't accidentally hit the stop button, which in some ways is nice that you won't accidentally hit stop. In other ways, it becomes a little, at first it was bothersome to just remember that you have to turn the dial, and sometimes the dial isn't perfect to your touch, like it sometimes lags, and I found that to be something that could be improved upon. Let's see if so you can see the lock button, and you have to keep turning it there, and it finally unlocked, and then you can hit stop. So I found that to be one of those things to adjust to, as well as it just, that rolling feature isn't perfectly sensitive. So it would just lag if you're not going quickly enough on it or if your hand slips. So it was something that I think could be an easy fix, something easy to improve upon, but something that I got used to eventually. The other big part is the interface on the apps. I ended up preferring the Coros app, and I've been a Garmin person since I started using a GPS watch, and the Garmin Connect app is fine, but I did find that the Coros app was a little bit cleaner looking, more easy to navigate, and it could get me to the statistics that I wanted in time. Obviously, the statistics between these two types of watches is very different. The Apex Pro is for those of you who are going to want like all of the data, all of it, and this is going to be more simplistic, where it's just going to give you your splits, you'll get your heart rates, and kind of go from there. Huge difference between these two was my heart rate. The heart rate when I was doing workouts was about 10 beats per minute different between the Apex Pro and the Forerunner 245. It was about 10 beats per minute higher in the 245 to the Coros Apex Pro. And when compared to a chest strap, the Apex Pro was significantly more accurate. Not perfect, but more accurate than the 245 was. And that could be a big part of what we want to talk about next. So the other thing that both of these watches are going to do is that both Coros and Garmin are going to have these algorithms that try to help you with your training. So instead of having a run coach or listening to your body or all these other different ways, they're trying to use the data that it's gathering to give us insight on how should we be training. So it tells you your training status, it tells you your fatigue levels. They call it running performance. After every run, they're going to give you a number of how well you perform compared to your fitness levels. They give you a fatigue number, and then the recovery as well, which is going to tell you, if you click into it, how many days are recommended for rest and how long before you can start easy training or hard training. And within the running performance is where they give you your race predictors. So both of these watches are going to try to give you all of that kind of data of helping you guide your training. There's just a lot of problems with that. First is you just have to make sure that if you're going to use this to help guide you, don't let it be the last and only word. You have to take into account all the other parts of you that this can't account for. And that's going to be things like your mental state, your stress levels, everything going on with your family or that day with work. You can't predict how you're feeling with all of those things. It's not going to know if you start having pain. So if you have knee pain, your watch isn't going to be like, oh, maybe you want to try this kind of workout or change to this type of shoe or, maybe cut that workout short. All it's going to say is your heart rate was this, you slept this long, and it's going to use all of those as your metrics. And that just can't get a full picture of you. So take all of those data points with an extreme grain of salt. And I actually find them less helpful than helpful, because often if I do a nice easy run, it's telling me that my performance index is in the fair category, which that isn't really great from a psyche perspective. It makes me think, I should have just ran harder. And so you just have to be really cautious with how you ingest the information coming from your watch, whether it's from the 245 or the Apex Pro. To be able to get the best metrics possible, there's a couple things you can do. One is you'll have to wear it 24/7 because it's tracking your activity, it's tracking your sleep, and you have to trust that it's tracking your sleep and things like that accurately. Sometimes even if you're just laying in bed still, it can start to go into sleep mode, which I've had happen before with both of these watches. That's just, they're not smart enough to know when we actually sleep. So you would have to wear it 24 hours a day to get as much data to it as you can and enter in any information that they allow you to enter into the watch. The last thing that I'll say about these algorithms is that with the information that the Apex Pro was able to get, it was better at predicting my times for races based on my recent racing experience. Not that it was accurate, it was just more accurate. I recently ran a marathon in October. I ran a 3:29:46 or something, just under 3:30. Right now, this is predicting. I hadn't trained in this watch until after my marathon. It's predicting a 3:20, which isn't too bad. Maybe if it was a miracle day, that could happen. Whereas my Forerunner says that I could run a 3:08, which is not possible for me right now. And at the same time, both of these watches predict that my 5K time is like 20:35 or something. And even just 2 days ago, I ran a tempo run and ran a 19:30 5K. So the ability for these to predict what we can do, again, grain of salt, slightly more accurate and close in the Coros, likely because it's getting more data than the 245, and especially given that heart rate difference between the two watches is big enough. So given the accuracy of the heart rate monitor comparison with the Apex Pro compared to the 245, that as well as the battery life, which I haven't even talked about, but I didn't charge this thing for the first 3 to 4 weeks, and I was running 3 times a week and wore it all day for work because I use it for my stopwatch and all this stuff when I'm working with patients. The battery life is insane. It lasts 30 days on its own, 40 hours in GPS mode, where it's like 24 hours in GPS mode on the Forerunner. So huge difference in battery life. So I think some of the accuracy things that come with the Coros, the usability on the app, and just for me, the way that I was able to interact with the app a little bit better. I think that I'm going to turn into a Coros guy in the future, but that probably won't happen for who knows how long, because I've only had this for 3 years and it works great. So I'm going to keep using this until it dies. But I did appreciate some of the usability on this watch. I just think for me, I won't go with the Apex Pro because I'm not, I don't get bogged down or excited about all of the data that comes in. And I think that it can be detrimental to my own training just because I get in my head about it. And sometimes I end up pushing a lot harder than I should because I get driven by the feedback that says, oh, that was only a fair run. You were not at your max capacity, all of these kinds of things. And just letting myself enjoy running a lot more than just being driven by data. So there we go. We have some quick comparisons between the Coros Apex Pro and the Garmin 245, again, which are in two very different categories of watches, but it is what I'm using. The 245 fits every single need that I have for workouts and daily running and using it for work. I do like some of the usability features, which makes me think that I will try out the Coros Pace 2 or whatever version it's on whenever I look up to get a new watch, but that will be for another day. Hope you guys have a good day. Leave us questions if you have any about either of these watches that we didn't cover. And again, I'll have links below with more details about the watch that you can click on. Thanks, everybody.